There. All right, everybody, I got 7 o'clock, right as Ray stood up to get some delicious Troutdale drinking water. We are going to begin the meeting tonight. It is the regular meeting for January 9th of the Troutdale City Council. Let's go ahead and have roll call. Sarah, please and thank you.
Okay. Counselor Rittma.
Here.
Counselor Caswell.
Here.
Counselor One.
Here.
Counselor White.
Here.
Counselor Wittrin.
Present.
Counselor Glantz.
Present.
Mayor Lauer.
Here. Let's go ahead and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. Ray, do we have an agenda update for this evening?
No, Mayor, the agenda is as written tonight. No corrections or deletions or changes.
All right, moving on to item number 2, a motion for election of a 2024 City Council President. Councilor White?
Yeah, Mayor, if Dave Rittman is willing, I'd like to nominate him. And besides just nominating him, I thought I'd mention a few things. Dave runs the meeting well. He has long experience on council. He served on the Planning Commission and Parks Advisory Commission. He is currently our representative for the Flood Safety District and president, I think for the second time. Third for the Board of Directors for the Troutdale Historic Society.
All right, got a nomination for Council President Rittma. Councilor Witcher.
I'd also like to nominate Counselor One. I think Counselor One's shown a lot of engagement his first year here, and also having an option to have a different voice if needed. So,
yeah. Okay. Do I have a? Okay, we can just do a vote for both. Okay, since Councilor Rittma was nominated first, we'll take a roll call for Rittma, and then we'll take a roll call for Councilor One. Okay.
Okay. So this is for Counselor Rittma. Counselor White.
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin.
no.
Counselor Glantz.
Yes.
Counselor Rittma.
Yes.
Counselor Caswell.
Yes.
Counselor One.
No.
Mayor Lauer.
Even though I can count, Councilor Rittma, I'm still going to vote no, just because what I'm hoping for a council president, and I'm hoping that he'll take this into consideration going into this next year, is that I think this council deserves a council president that is present at the council meetings for more meetings than they're not. And I'm not saying that we can't be present on Zoom. I just think that the community can appreciate and understand that city council that's more present than not is can be viewed as more useful than sitting at home. So I voted no, even though.
Okay. So I'll go through and read the other one anyway,
Yeah, that's fine. We can. That's fine. Ceremoniously.
Sure. This will be for Counselor One. Counselor White.
No, nothing personal.
Counselor Wittrin.
Yes.
Counselor Glantz.
No.
Counselor Rittma.
No. Nothing personal.
Counselor Caswell.
No.
Counselor One.
Yes.
And Mayor Lauer.
Yes. All right. Thank you. Council President Rittma, congratulations.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'll try to show up more often if it's going to help, but
It couldn't hurt. Let's just say that.
I do when it seems important for me to be here, but I actually think the Zoom calls are very effective. So anyway, but let's not debate that.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I appreciate your comment. I'll
Yep.
think about
All right, let's move on to agenda item number 3, public comment. Public comment on non-agenda and consent agenda items is welcome at this time. Public comment on agenda items will be taken at the time the item is considered. Public comment should be directed to the presiding officer and limited to matters of community interest or related to matters which may or could come before council. Each speaker shall be limited to 5 minutes for each agenda item unless a different amount of time is allowed by the presiding officer with consent of the council. The council and mayor should avoid immediate or protracted responses to citizen comments. Let's go ahead and in the council chambers tonight, we have no public comment. On Zoom, go ahead and unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record. All right, not seeing.
Mayor Lauer,
Oh, there we go, Mr. Wilcox.
I couldn't find the unmute button. Thank you, Mayor Lauer. Paul Wilcox. Got a couple of prepared comments, but since Sarah's there this evening, I don't think she was there in December. I just wanted to add this little addition to my comments. I'd like to nominate Sarah as my most valuable employee. She provides invaluable information that I find extremely invaluable. So just wanted to add that to the mix. And so I'll just get into my prepared comment. Before I get into my main comment topic, I wanted to share a somewhat personal recent experience. We were at home. I don't remember the exact date. It was late December after Christmas, I think. We were at home and heard shouting outside, followed by popping sounds. Looking out a side rear window, we could see huge flames up the front of a house across the street around the corner. When we went outside to see closer, 2 MCSO patrol cars were just arriving, followed very shortly by several Gresham fire trucks. I can't say for certain what the overall response time was since we didn't make the 911 call, but it seemed within minutes. Once the first fire trucks had arrived and the crew had hooked up to the nearby fire hydrant, the flames lapping at the front second-story bedroom window were extinguished in a matter of minutes. The separation between houses in our development is in some cases as little as 7 feet. We were very impressed with the prompt response and actions taken upon arrival by the first responders. And now is my main topic. This is my next installment on issues with the Troutdale City Charter, Section 28, filling of vacancies. Last time I addressed mayoral vacancies. Tonight it will be councillor vacancies. The charter reads, quote, "A vacancy in the office of councillor shall be filled by appointment by a majority of the council," unquote. A literal reading of this would allow for a departing councillor to participate in selecting their replacement. This is in fact what happened in 2016 after Councillor Anderson announced at the January 26th meeting that he would be resigning effective March 31st. His replacement, Corey Brooks, was ultimately sworn in on April 12th. Since Councillor Anderson had given 2 months' notice, the city attorney had advised that the selection process could occur prior to his resignation date. Council chose to follow that advice, although there was some dissension as to filling the position while it was still occupied. Councillor Anderson did not offer to abstain and in fact offered himself up as a possible tiebreaker. In the end, a majority of 4 votes was reached without his participation. It's also worth noting that Councillor Anderson participated fully in the candidate interviews during the March 14th work session, which strikes me as highly inappropriate and irregular. Of course, those who were there will remember that there was also a huge controversy over who the appointee would be, but that was an entirely different issue, unrelated to whether the outgoing councillor would participate in the final vote. Anyone interested in those details can read the March 22nd meeting minutes. Most cities use language identical or similar to the LOC model charter language, which reads, quote, "A mayor or councillor vacancy will be filled by appointment by a majority of the remaining council members." The key word here is remaining. All of the above described angst could have been avoided if the word remaining had been included in the charter language. I will acknowledge that there are 4 of 20 other area cities surveyed that allow for simple majority versus remaining. so Troutdale is not alone in this perceived language flaw. I will point out also that there are weaknesses in the LOC model charter as well. For example, it goes on to say, quote, "The appointee's term of office runs from appointment until expiration of the term of office of the last person elected to that office," unquote. A literal reading of this statement would allow for up to a 4-year appointment. Most cities have added language for an appointment to only last until the year end after the next general election. That'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else on Zoom wishes to address the council? Now is the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself. State your name and city of residence for the record. All right, not seeing anybody. I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. We have agenda item number 4, consent agenda. Council President Rittmer, if you wouldn't mind reading the consent agenda.
All right, 4.1, resolution, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement with the City of Gresham for continued building inspection services. And I move adoption.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilor White. All right, let's take a roll call, Sarah.
Okay. Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes.
Counselor Rittmer,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
Yes.
Counselor One,
Yes.
and Mayor Lauer.
Yes. All right, thank you. Let's move on to agenda item number 5, public hearing and ordinance first introduced on the 12th of December of all the way back of last year. An ordinance updating public contract and purchasing procedures and amending chapter 2.24 of the Troutdale Municipal Code. Mr. Mueller, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you just mentioned, this is the second reading. At your last council meeting in December, we had the first reading. And as I indicated in the staff report, there was only minor changes to the packet material from that last meeting, eliminating a bunch of excess pages that for the existing code, fixing my date that I had incorrect there, saying that it had been 20 years, actually it had been 2 years since we did the update, and inserting at the suggestion that Councilor Glenn had observed the or designee into the section 11 in the ordinance. Those were the only changes. Just as recap, the Troutdale has chosen to adopt its own purchasing code so that it is not subject to the, or limited by the state model code. So it allows it as the, sitting as the local contractor review board to exercise a little bit more local control. This is update is coming because the legislature has made changes to the state purchasing code. And part of the requirements for us to maintain our own code is that we have to update it when they make changes to the state code, or we lose that degree of independence. The purchasing code provides the practices and methods to, provide for a systematic and uniform framework for the city staff to conduct the purchasing process for various city goods and services that are necessary. This update will help bring us back into compliance from becoming out of compliance as of 9 days ago when the state changes went into effect the first of the year. And so with that, I'm happy to address any questions that may have come up as you've spent the entire month pondering this since we last met.
All right, any comments or questions from council? Okay. Not seeing anybody jump at the opportunity. If there's no comments or questions for staff, we can go ahead and get through and start the public hearing on this matter. So let's go ahead and open up public hearing on agenda item number 5, an ordinance updating public contract and purchasing procedures and amending chapter 2.24 of the Troutdale Municipal Code. So now's the time for the public to speak. In council chambers?
As riveting as it is, I'm gonna have to pass.
On Zoom, if anybody wishes to speak or make public comment regarding this agenda item, now's the time. So again, unmute yourself, state your name and city of residence for the record, please. All right, not seeing anybody jump at that chance as well. Close public hearing. Any other comments or discussion for staff before we entertain a motion? Eric, I think you've done a fine job. All right, I would entertain a motion on the ordinance.
Well, I move adoption of an ordinance updating public contract and purchasing procedures and amending chapter 2.24 of the Troutdale Municipal Code.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Richard.
Okay,
And I've thought of little else since.
Sleepless nights, I'm sure.
okay. Counselor White,
Yes.
Counselor Wittrin,
Yes.
Counselor Glantz,
Yes.
Counselor Ritma,
Yes.
Counselor Caswell,
Yes.
Counselor One,
Yes.
Mayor Lauer.
Yes. Thank you, Eric. We're going to move on to agenda item number 6, a resolution approving the city's financial statements and annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023, and accepting the independent auditor's report. Mr. Mueller again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is the annual report that I bring forward each January from our fiscal year ended last June 30th. We've got the audit complete and the annual comprehensive financial report completed and filed with the state as well as with the Government Finance Officers Association. This process is part of the council's annual and continuing financial oversight of the city's fiscal affairs. The auditor's report provides a independent assurance of the basic financial statements that they are reliable and accurate. It's the role of the auditors to express an opinion on the fairness and presentation of the financial statements. It's management's responsibility to maintain and prepare the financial statements, and the council's role to provide the ultimate oversight and approval. The large attachment A is the comprehensive annual financial report, and there's several pages in there which we'll touch on. As I mentioned in the staff report, it's got basically 5 different components that make up the whole package. The large annual comprehensive financial report provides all of the different required financial presentation layouts that are required for all of the funds, as well as a statistical section that provides a number of operational and financial details about the city. Many of those are required for part of our ongoing compliance and disclosure requirements for our publicly issued debt, referred to as a continuing disclosure. The audit opinion letter is tucked away in the midst of the Exhibit A, the comprehensive annual financial report. It's page number 1, even though it's several pages in. But ultimately, the key part of the long outline of what they indicate what they did and what their responsibilities are is that they've issued again this year, thankfully, a unmodified opinion, which is also known as a clean opinion with no reservations. Indicates that in their opinion, the financial statements referred to above present fairly and in all material respects the respective financial position of the city in accordance with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America. So anyway, that's the type of audit opinion that you want. The second component is the management letter, and that one again this year is missing in that they did not issue one because they had no basis to issue a management letter. The management letter is officially referred to as the Statement on Auditing Standards 115, communicating internal control related matters identified in the audit, and they had no internal control related matters to communicate. So again, there was no management letter issued again this year. The Oregon Municipal Audit Law is at the very back of that first Exhibit A, page 116, and it reviews a number of items that are in addition to the generally accepted accounting principles that are required of Oregon municipal corporations related to positive funds, indebtedness limitations, budgets, insurance, highway revenues, and gas tax money that's used for gas tax is part of what's tested, so forth. On page 116, they noted one exception for excess of expenditures over appropriations, and the categories were reported on page 24. As I mentioned in the staff report, there's basically 3 areas where yours truly is going to get hauled off to local budget law jail. The first 2 were related to interest payments on internal loans. Part of that challenge is when I did the budget back in March of the prior year, interest rates were at about 0.5%. And by the time the fiscal year ended, they were at 5%, a 10-fold increase. And as a result, I didn't have enough budgeted, and I didn't catch that before the end of the fiscal year that I could bring it and have it adjusted for a budget adjustment to the council last June. So we overpaid we spent over our budgeted amount by $112 on the interest due from the Bike and Path Trails Fund. Again, it's an internal loan paying from one fund to another, so we didn't send money out of the city to anyone. The other one is the Urban Renewal Agency. That one you'll hear again about a week from now when we go through this process for the Urban Renewal Agency's financial statements. But again, debt service on the loan from the general fund to the Urban Renewal Agency, again, under budgeted for that same reason. The third item, the $391,000 overage, tad bit more than 112. That one was not related to interest payments, but as I mentioned in the staff report, that's related to the GASB 87 statement on leases, which we had to actually implement as a city the year prior. Part of the challenge was in the second year of the lease process, there was a required, what they refer to as a remeasurement, and there was an acquirement since it's a new standard, whereas I'm ultimately responsible. It was one of those things that the auditors and I didn't discuss till after the fiscal year, and as a result, I had to fix it with journal entries at that point, but it was past when I, of course, could have a budget adjustment done. As I also mentioned in the staff report, there was no check written, there was no disbursement of funds. This was internal entries where we both had a charge as well as a revenue that offset each other. So each of these items were just internal accounting entries and were essentially technical violations rather than what they would refer to as substantive exceptions to the minimum audit standards for municipal corporations. The auditors have made note of it as part of their compliance process, but they've not given it any greater weight as a result, since it is they were just technical. So I'll stop there in case there are questions about my violations. Okay, and then the next section is the auditor communication to the governing body. That's another SAS number 114. That is actually Exhibit B, which is the other attachment to this agenda item at the very back, the top of the second page. This is the communications with the governing body. The auditors are required to provide open and accurate communication to the governing body, and as part of this auditing standard. And at the top of the second page, they outline the results of the audit. As I mentioned earlier, the audit had a clean, unmodified opinion, and that there was no management letter issued was another one of the results of the audit. And then they mentioned the minimum standards, the exceptions that I just mentioned. Otherwise, there was no significant issues as they deem them on any of the other matters over the next 3 pages of what they're required to report on. And as I mentioned, there's put it here, get myself out of order. Yeah, the deficiencies are lowest is not significant deficiencies, intermediate is significant deficiencies, and most serious is material weaknesses. They had no deficiencies were observed in any of those three categories, thankfully. So no issues resulting there. And then last year, you may or may not recall that there was an additional section that we hadn't had in prior years, the long-winded uniform administrative requirements, cost principles, and audit requirements for federal awards, uniform guidance. That's related to federal funding, federal grants provided that exceed $750,000 aggregate in a year. Last year was the first year that we had that, and that was as a result of the ARPA 2021 Act, the coronavirus state and local fiscal recovery funds, the 1.8 million that we had received in the prior year. After the first year of reporting, the Treasury Department went back and revised the requirements because they didn't want all the reports, they didn't want all the paperwork for any entity that had received less than $10 million. It was just too much paperwork for them to deal with. So they revised the requirements, and so as a result, this year, we don't have that schedule like we did last year. Something that was covered within the auditor, with the auditors. And then the final section, I mentioned this last year because it was the first year we had it. We had a fair value adjustment for unrealized, and I emphasize the unrealized loss in the Oregon Short-Term Fund. As I explained last year, the majority of the city's fund balances are held in the local government investment pool that's managed by the state treasurer's office. That's essentially operated as a kind of an independent investment fund. They operated similar to what a money market mutual fund is, where there's a target of $1 value per share. As a result of those dramatic interest rate increases that the Federal Reserve implemented, there was a number of bonds that, as the interest rates were increased, the bonds with longer maturity that at lower rates lost value in the marketplace. And so as a result, last year, we had to recognize a $415,000 unrealized loss in our financial statements and in the audit. This year, for this report for tonight, it was a smaller unrealized loss that we had to recognize of $177,000. It's an improvement in the overall portfolio and value of the underlying assets at the state fund. I would emphasize that last year's $115,000 unrealized loss, that we did not experience any actual loss as a result of booking that entry. And I do not expect us to experience any actual loss of this $177,000 this year. My hope is that as a result of the portfolio continuing to mature at the state fund, that a year from now, this will not be an area that we have to deal with for a third straight year, but that remains to be seen how the marketplace happens over the course of the remainder of this year and through June 30th. So in summary, this is the resolution establishes the official record of the city financial statements, supports the transparency to the public and to the debt investors of the city's sources and uses of funds. However, the proposed resolution does not approve the audit opinion and letter reports, but rather accepts them, as these reports are the auditor's professional judgment and they're not subject to the client's approval or disapproval. So with that, that's the end of my long-winded presentation, and I thank you for the opportunity to have all that on the record. I think it's important for it to be in the record that the council has received all of the information and has had the opportunity to exert their oversight responsibilities. And with that, I'm happy to address any questions there may be.
That was short for you, Eric. I'm kidding.
I'm getting better with practice, I guess.
I have one question, Eric. we've had, sorry, Counselor Glantz, we've had, as you've stated over the past 7 years, we've had boring reports, which is great. You want a boring report.
Yep.
If you can, tell me what a not boring report could lead to.
Could lead to?
Yeah, could lead to. What happens if, say, our finance director retires and we can't find anybody to do it? Say our auditors show up and there's no one to greet them at the door. Say we don't even call the auditors one year. What happens if a city doesn't do these things?
Well, there's some compliance issues with state law, and the Oregon Secretary of State's office would issue some penalties and so forth on that front. I think the bigger and really more serious implications would be is that we'd be out of compliance with the covenants on our publicly issued debt. We have an obligation to produce an audit annually, and it's one of the things that I have to do later this week is post the report on the Municipal Securities Regulatory Reporting Board. I get the acronym messed up, but it's essentially the regulatory body where you publish all of the information, and it's tied to each of the CUSIP numbers for each of the securities for the debt that we've issued. One of the representations this council made when they approved that general obligation debt, and then when they approved the refinancing that we did recently 3-4 years ago, was that we would provide continuing disclosure, which is that we would annually provide these financial statements as well as a number of those kind of operating statistics that I mentioned that are sort of start on page 95. That's for the debt holders out in the marketplace who own the debt, who could choose to sell it or continue to hold it, for them to be able to monitor the value of their investment in the city's bonds. So, not doing the audit would impair that value. It certainly would take us out of compliance with our debt issuance. It would damage our credit rating for the next time the city would need to do a debt offering. We would have a record of not complying with our representations on debt issuances, which would not be a good thing for the next time we needed to sell debt in the marketplace. That's some of the things I think that would happen if, the circumstance that you described occurred, then we didn't have auditors and didn't do an audit.
Okay, just curious. It's great that we have boring reports. It's a fantastic thing. I love a good disaster movie though, but I like to live in a world where we're filled with boring reports, but I like to be entertained. So thank you, I appreciate that.
Certainly.
Counselor Glantz.
Yeah, a little bit more on that. Is this like a pass-fail or are there grades?
Well, I guess you could call there grades. As I mentioned earlier on, the auditors have different categories of deficiencies that I mentioned before. And so they can issue a clean opinion. They can issue an opinion, what they refer to as a qualified opinion, where they'll say everything is fine except for, which, if you say a clean opinion is an A, then, maybe if you've got some exceptions that they're going to qualify the opinion on, maybe it's a B or a C or something, but I wouldn't say it's entirely a pass-fail. There certainly would be a category where it would be fail, but it's not just one or the other, I would say.
Okay. And thank you for the information on the unrealized loss. That was one of my questions I had written in advance. Am I understanding correctly that basically money that we hold, we put into an investment tool that might bring us additional money, but it's the difference between what we put in and what we might have gotten in interest that we didn't see? Because what I heard was we got all our money back. We didn't lose money.
Right. The local government investment pool is something that's established by state statute. All of the counties as well as all the cities have an account with with state treasurer. And this is, as people make their property tax payments last month and the month before, as each of the county treasurers does the reconciliation of those, when they reconcile all those payments, that are received, this is how they distribute the money to the various entities, to us, to the school district, to the county, et cetera. They deposit those tax proceeds into our pool account, as it's referred to at the state. That's where we hold the money. That's where, when we get the gas tax, the ODOT dumps the money into the pool account. The state shared revenues that you approve each year as part of the budget process, when that gets distributed, it gets distributed to us into the pool account. And so that's where the majority of our funds reside. It is a regulated private investment pool based on the nature of the statutes and the federal laws that structured it. But we don't make the city doesn't make the investment choices. The entire pool that our money is commingled with all the other counties and cities and so forth, that entire pool is managed by a team of investment managers that works for the state treasurer. And they buy a portfolio of different government bonds, agency bonds, et cetera, as part of investing that money, because that money is not all going to get used one day. So they're investing it in securities that are going to bring interest earnings back to the pool, of which we get a share of, our relative share. And so, yes, we earn interest on that balance that's maintained in the pool. Those investments, there's a treasury security that was, priced at 3%, and the Fed's now raised interest rates to 5%. Well, the market value of that 3% bond has gone down if you want to sell it today. The reason we don't experience any loss is that they're not obligated to sell it. They can hold it till maturity, and they're going to get 100% of the bond value at maturity. It's only if you've got to try and sell something before maturity that you would potentially realize the loss, which again is why the pool and the city haven't experienced any of that loss. And as that short-term bond fund continues to, every month, it's further maturing, more and more of those things are coming and being redeemed at full value. And so the depressed market value gets erased little by little.
Okay, thank you. That's an excellent explanation. On attachment A, page 4C, there's table 1, and it shows that we had like a $90 million position. What does that mean?
That is the total summary of net position is the government terminology for essentially net worth. As you think of it, so it's essentially the difference between all of our assets and all of our liabilities. So if you think about a personal net worth, whatever your personal investments and retirement savings are minus your mortgage, your assets minus your liabilities is your net worth. That's effectively what this is, but it's in government speak.
And why did ours go up? I would think with the dollar sale to City Hall, it would have gone down.
Well, part of what drives it is as we invest in new capital assets, we convert cash into capital assets. Those capital assets run down at a lower rate based on depreciation. For any of the funds where we brought in more revenue from an operational standpoint than we spent in the year, we would have increased our net position from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. So like for the SDC funds where Fox Ridge Apartments down the street on Halsey, they wrote us, $500,000 check for several different SDC charges. Well, we didn't turn around and go spend that money out of the SDC fund. We accumulated it for a future infrastructure investment. So that added to our net position, that little piece, all the funds together.
Okay, thank you. And then my last question is, what are deferred outflows?
Deferred outflows are It's a timing issue. Most of it relates to pension obligations, but in more broad definitions, deferred outflows are liabilities that you know that you are going to have, but they are going to occur in a subsequent reporting period. But they're quantifiable in the current reporting period, and so they have to be recognized is the wrong word, but they have to be reported as essentially a future liability. I'm sure I'm mangling that up a bit. The dozens of CPAs who are listening to this presentation, I'm sure are cringing, but
Chastising you as you speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Glantz. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Mueller? All right, let's open it up to public comment. Public comments open on a resolution approving the city's financial statements and annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30, 2023, and accepting the independent auditor's report. Council Chambers.
I just appreciate the report and good job done.
Yeah. Anybody on Zoom wishes to make a comment, now's the time again. Unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record. All right, we close public comment. If there's no more comments or questions for staff, I would entertain a motion.
Make a motion that we accept the resolution approving the city's financial statement for the annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2023, and accepting the independent auditor's report.
Second. Second by Councilor One.
Okay. Councilor White,
Yes.
Councilor Woodring,
Yes.
Councilor Glantz,
Yes.
Councilor Rittman,
Yes.
Councilor Caswell,
Yes.
Councilor One,
Yes.
Mayor Lauer.
Yes. Thank you, Eric, very much for your hard work. Are we in line for the 34th consecutive certificate of excellence?
I have filed the report and the required application and paperwork, so we will await their grading, which we will not get until probably September.
Do you have enough wall space and frames for all for the certificates? Okay. All right, everybody, thank you very much. Let's move on to agenda item number 7, a report, the next steps for law enforcement and fire services contract. Mr. Ray Young, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. As you recall, last month's meeting in December, we received a report from the Public Safety Working Group as to the steps they felt we needed to take in preparation to negotiate our next law enforcement and fire contracts or provide that ourselves. Council asked staff to come back with action steps to take those recommendations, actually do something with them. And so I took the recommendations in exhibits A and B, and to that I added red notes indicating staff suggested action steps. And so as I'll probably go through law enforcement first, what I'd be asking council at this point is, do you see any problems with these suggested action steps? And do you have any other action steps that you think we might be taking? And so I'll go through those one at a time. So we'll start with exhibit A. And number 1, and my first typo on number 1, it should, where it says review hire consultant to compare current service levels, get information from similar sized cities regarding service levels and determine what's desirable or recommended to be done under D below. It should be C below. My apologies. And the reference in C below, if you look to the second page of exhibit A, it's to create a study group, including law enforcement experts, to review previous Troutdale FTE and determine the preferred FTE. The one above it, B, is very similar in that it adds a study group, including law enforcement personnel that would help review our current Multnomah County law enforcement contract and to determine the preferred FTE comparisons to what we have now. Overall, the 3 viable options we have for law enforcement services in Troutdale are, number one, continuing with Multnomah County, where we have to determine the level of service we want. Number two, take that same level of service we want and get Gresham to quote it and give us a price for it. Or number three, we take an overall department FTE level and we create a Troutdale Police Department. And so this study group that I'm referring to, I would ask the council this evening to make a motion to reconstitute the Public Safety Working Group, to give them the mission to review, if we're seeking law enforcement from a third-party provider, that we review our current contract with Multnomah County and see how we might modify it in such a way that would improve our law enforcement coverage to meet the needs of the community. And then along with that, also determine if we were to recreate and hire a consultant to determine the cost to recreate the Troutdale Police Department, what size police department would we ask them to create? You need to know what your target is before you can hire a consultant in that regard. So that's probably the most important action step I'd ask the council make tonight, is to reauthorize, since their life died at the last council meeting in terms of council authority, is to reconstitute them to look at those two items that are necessary for proceeding to get information on those three pathways. So that's what the working group would do, would be, and they could hire consultants, law enforcement consultants, to help them figure out what would be the proper law enforcement coverage for our city. Along that line, I've already asked my assistant Kimberly to start calling similar sized cities in Oregon and find out what their staffing is, what their schedule is, how many deputies do they have or officers they have on 24/7, getting copies of their budget for law enforcement, just to get an idea of what other cities of similar size are spending for law enforcement. And I've also talked to Jensen Strategies, which is a consultant company, a headhunter company that do a lot of different types of evaluations, and they're willing to give us a bid to actually come up with a price to recreate the Troutdale Police Department and what would be a likely annual budgetary cost for that. It's something that it may not be practical in terms of cost, but it's something that citizens usually ask, why don't we have the Troutdale Police Department anymore? So we need to give them a good answer as to, well, we can afford it, or we can't afford it, whatever the answer is. So that's why the working group is going to be important for that. Number two is related in that, again, looking at lower cost alternatives. I think we've mentioned this before, where armed sworn law enforcement costs easily 50 to 75% more than a non-sworn security type person, whether it's a park ranger, a code compliance officer. And so that public safety working group would kind of look at, maybe there's some things we should, in lieu of adding law enforcement, we should add some other options that might be cheaper to provide us the needs that we might have. That's number three. Again, that can wait, because we have to figure out what we're going to ask Gresham before we can do number three. It's what I kind of talked about. What level of service would we like them to do? Number four is the same thing. We can't go back to the county and ask for a bid from them until we say, well, we like what you gave us before, but we want this instead, so price this one out for us. So those would have to wait till the public service working group came up with those numbers. Number five, as I indicated, is simply to get the consultant, and I've already talked to Jensen Strategies, and they're coming up with a proposal for us for cost to do that. But also, again, that would kind of wait for a couple months until the public safety working group can determine how big a department are we looking at, if they were going to give us a cost for a Troutdale Police Department. Number six is the alternative to sworn officers, which is kind of touched upon in number two above. Again, the public safety working group reconstituted would talk about that and come up with a recommendation for you. Number seven is simply to ask for a report. As you recall from our meeting, those on the public safety working group, when we did the law enforcement focus night, where we had three command level individuals and chiefs talk to us, one of the things you would like to get is to find out if they keep a report on discretionary, non-discretionary time. That means discretionary time is when a deputy or an officer doesn't have a particular call or assignment to do something, or they're just on their own to patrol. You know, it's discretionary time. The non-discretionary time, of course, is when they're beginning a particular assignment, or they're answering a call, or they're on a call, or they're on a stop, or they have to do what they're doing. And so determining that, because it's important to know how much, I guess, for want of a better term, how much free time your law enforcement personnel have to make their own discretionary decisions what they're doing. So that's something we can check on with Multnomah County Sheriff to find out what those percentages are now for our 2 district deputies that are on the road. Number 8 is a similar vein that I know other contract cities have asked for, which is to get a report for them to find out how many, let me back up a little bit, just so I make sure the record is clear. Under our current contract with Multnomah County Sheriff, we are entitled to 2 cars on the road 24/7. They are in 2 districts, District 60 and District 70. And hopefully I don't reverse that, but I believe District 70 is pretty much top of Buxton, Cherry Park, all the way south is District 70. And District 60 is everything north of there through downtown, truck stops, and out to the industrial area. So those are the 2 districts that we have. And the question under this is, how many times are they called out to help other Multnomah County jurisdictions? Either Multnomah County or the other cities, or even Gresham or Portland, just to find out, well, how many, what percentage of time. So that's a report I will ask that I know I think Fairview got one last year.
Yeah, they did.
So they should be able to get that report. So that'll be asked this month. 9 is an odd question. I don't know if there's an answer to that one, but I may ask the county to see if they've ever thought about that, because Troutdale has always had its own police departments. Far back as we all know, Multnomah County Sheriffs have kind of been around. Well, what kind of coverage do they give if you don't have your own police department other than our current contract? I mean, a nursery field over in South Multnomah County, how often is there a deputy in that area? Does that mean Troutdale would get that if they didn't have a contract, just because we pay Multnomah County taxes? Interesting question, and I think as we heard last time in 2014-15, looking over here at former Councilor Rich Allen, they never really could determine a straight answer to that. Really, is there any way of determining that? Since the vast majority of the population of Multnomah County is also covered by their own police departments. Portland, Gresham, Troutdale historically, Fairview historically. So most of the population has never been in that situation. So anyway, I've still got to think about that one for recommendation and action step. I may just talking about that. Number 10, look at our current IGA to see if we can get greater clarification. I think some of the concerns we've had is some of the things that we are supposed to be getting and we're paying for. It's really hard to determine metric-wise, are we actually getting that? But I've used the example that under our current contract, we're paying for 2/3 of a command staff person to be our chief of police. I've loved all 4 of them. They're great, wonderful people, but I don't think any of them will tell me that they've ever spent more than 20% of their average week doing Troutdale work. And if you look at their job titles, they've had full-time jobs with the county while they're assigned to be our chief. And so that's one of those areas where it's like, we need to either pay only 20% for a command officer, or we should figure out how we need to get 2/3 of that time and not give another full-time job at the county. So I think the working group would be good to look at that, because they're going to be examining our current contract anyway to see where we want to tweak it, but they may want to think about those hours that are listed there. And finally, number 11 is to get a commercial real estate broker to tell us what is the lease value of this building. So when we get into a new lease, so that one could probably wait, because that's probably, what, 2 months to get a commercial lease review? I'm looking at Ed right now. I think 2 months is fair. So it's something we can get relatively quickly compared to this process we get into it. So anyway, on law enforcement, I did note down here on number E that contract a number of different places that might give us help in helping us to determine if we're in the ballpark of what a correct law enforcement coverage would be for a city of our size. I've sent emails out to Southern Oregon and to Portland State, and I haven't contacted DPST yet, but I will just see, do they have anybody that can help us talk about what police coverage is, and what it should look like? So just to help the public safety working group, if you reconstitute them, to kind of have at least an expert opinion as to what coverage for this city should be. So in terms of what we should have for law enforcement, I think if we get 5 or 6 other cities of similar size, what they spend and what their coverages are, and we get input from experts on the outside who might give us a fairly clean opinion of what we should be expecting, I think we'll have a pretty good idea of what we should be looking to negotiate for, whether it's creating our own department or Gresham or Multnomah County for our next contract. So anyway, talk long enough on law enforcement. Any questions, comments, suggestions, anything that we think we're missing here as next steps?
If we are looking at comparable cities, and this might be a stretch, is there a way to also include budgetary metric on that? Just because they're a comparable size might not mean they have a comparable budget. Can we try to just add that and see, not can we try, I know we can. Can we use that as a metric also, just to see if we can get more of an apple-to-apple
I
comparison?
think that would be good. I'll look at Eric. I think maybe trying is just, in addition to what their budget is for these services, what's their total general fund income?
Just to see if it's
Sure.
similar.
Yeah.
I know it's gonna be a shot in the dark, maybe.
And two, because a lot of cities use their property tax income, because that, for years, that was kind of the primary income for cities for general fund. It's not anymore. But I'll get two numbers, and maybe the total general fund revenues and the property tax revenues, and then because that's a kind of a percentage we look at. Okay. With that note.
Councilor Wittrin?
No, I'd also say if we're looking at comparable cities, maybe have a relationship with those cities, but what is the feel of the service level that they're getting? If they're frustrated at council level or at city level with what the service they're getting, well, maybe they're short, or, hey, we're getting great service out here, and we feel like there's plenty of staff. But I know that's a little subjective, and maybe that's a little gray, but you might want to try to get a feel for what the city's feeling on their level. So.
Good idea. Yeah, that is
Counselor-
subjective, but might as well ask.
Yeah.
Because they could probably tell us in the community, the community's really in an upheaval because we don't have enough law enforcement. Then you say, well, maybe we shouldn't use that as a number to strive to.
Right.
Councilor Glantz?
Yeah, I'd like to see something in here with like date benchmarks, something to the effect of, we'll be at a certain point at this stage and a certain point at this stage. Because one of the things that really concerns me is it seems like we have a long time, but I don't think we really do.
I had an answer for that.
Okay.
Good suggestion. I say every month, one council meeting a month, the standing agenda item is law enforcement and fire. And so staff has to give you a report every single month at a council meeting. If there's one council meeting that month, that's the night we put it on the agenda. It's a standing agenda item every month from here on till July 1st, 2025, that we know once a month we're going to check in on staff, check in on developments, and have that discussion. Does that kind of meet what you're looking for, Councilor Glantz?
That would be great. Perfect. Good idea.
Yeah, I agree. Great suggestion. I think this is a good direction. I think the Public Safety Working Group did a good job coming up with these questions. And I think, right now, if anybody's got anything to chew on or wanting to get out, now's the time if we decide to reconstitute.
Yeah.
So looking at this, if there's anything at all we want to add, subtract, kind of dial in a little bit further, now's the time to do that. So we have a clear direction, not only for the Public Safety Working Group, but for staff moving forward. Councilor Rittman.
I think we should reconvene the Public Safety Working Group.
I agree.
That seems like that's essential. In Exhibit B, the number 7, consult with the bond levy fire district vote firm, which to find out what the steps are, Fire District 10, and regarding steps for possibly asking citizens to join Fire District 10. We also, I assume, are exploring with Wood Village, Fairview, and Gresham forming a fire district.
Yes,
Let's do something really quick. Let's just continue to chew on the police just for a little bit more, and then we'll finish this, and then we'll move on to the fire, just so we can keep things. But if you want to answer.
Yeah, I was going to say, absolutely. We are in constant communication with my cohorts at Wood Village and Fairview, making sure we work together on this. And I'll speak for the mayor. The mayor and Mayor Keith and Mayor John are also in close collaboration on the fire issue. So the three cities are figuring out, we're in bed together on this thing. We got to figure this out. And I know that I think I'll send it to you tomorrow morning. The 3 mayors and the 3 city managers gave a letter to the Gresham mayor today saying, can we sit down together and collaborate to come up with a solution long-term for fire protection in East County? I don't know if you're aware, but the Safer Council existed up until about 1.5 years ago, which was all the cities, Fire District 10, the Union. We were all talking in one room for 8-9 months to come up with a long-term solution for fire. And Gresham, in their leadership fall apart issues, they just pulled the plug and stopped the whole thing. And so we lost 1.5 years in working together. So we kind of asked Gresham, the 3 cities, can we get back to that table again, please, and work together? This is something that all our citizens deserve our time on. So we're absolutely working with the other cities to make sure that we collaborate. And we're trying to get Gresham to come back to the table. Is that fair, Mayor?
Yeah, no, that's a good summarization of that. Well, I think we can dive into that in a little bit here, and I'll fill you all in on what that meeting was this morning.
Yeah, if there's anything else, I don't know, but we're almost done with law enforcement, I think.
Yeah, I think one thing that I lost it. I lost what I wanted to bring up, but that's okay. If I think about it, we can come back. But if there's anything else anybody has on law enforcement before we go and switch gears to fire, now's the time. Councilor Wichard.
Not particularly law enforcement, we're talking about bringing back the public safety working group. One thing we got to think about and circulate again is a lot of those people are pulled off of 1-year details off of different groups within volunteer groups. So maybe those terms have already run out. I was on there before, and then I was allowed to stay a little extra as a transition council, but you may have to look at the head count and who's there and who's actually should be on this.
Okay. Good point. Councilor White.
Yeah, see on Exhibit A, number 2, it talks about red light cameras, and I just want to, voice my opinion against that idea. I'm not a fan of red light, traffic light cameras at all, especially in a tourist type town like we are. I view them as very unfriendly and a real distraction. A safety concern of mine is once I'm in a town I'm not familiar with and I see my first red light camera, I'm more focused on looking for cameras than I am watching the road or for pedestrians. And I think a lot of people are of that same mindset. So I guess I'd mention that. I also think we need, we had in the contract a certain number of hours at Glen Auto Park. And I think that, in the summertime, you can drive throughout the city and nothing's going on except at Glen Auto Park. And sometimes there's, 5,000 people there in that section. So we got to have some focus there. And I don't care if it's a park ranger or a security guard, but we just can't ignore that fact that is a concern for our city. I'm also agreeable to, I'm glad we're looking at this lease, because Troutdale's the only one paying for this building, but it's servicing Maywood Park, Soggy's Island, Wood Village, Fairview, Corbett. So I'm glad that we're going to address that. And to me, that living here as long as I have, it was really a great arrangement when we had our own police officers. And I'd be willing to pay them more money just to get that back. And then we also have the backup of the county, and they collaborated well. And I think our focus should be more on Troutdale, because when we try to team up with the other cities, like Wood Village has the most calls of any city. They have habitual callers that monopolize our public safety services. And we're paying the lion's share for those services out of the three cities. And so there's no incentive for them to control that or to do something about it. Well, Troutdale's paying for it. We're getting all the service time. So it's a real problem. And I think if Troutdale even had a small police force of our own, and we would continue to have county coverage, because we do pay just like Corbett gets county sheriff, and a lot more. And they used to just have one officer, and now you drive up there, you see quite a few of them up there. And oh, where was I? Anyway, I think Troutdale could eventually contract with Wood Village in Fairview if we started our own, if we had our own. And because you don't really have control unless you're paying the folks and they're working for your city, and then you know they're in your city all the time when they're working. And I think Nick's a great example of that, but it's just too expensive now. The price is like $250,000 to contract an officer for your city through the county sheriff. I think we could do a lot better starting small. I know when Rich was on the negotiation team, he fought hard to keep one of our Troutdale officers as a Troutdale officer. And the reason he wanted that is if this didn't work out, we'd at least have one officer left and we could grow that service. Unfortunately, it didn't make it in the contract. And to me, that you're not a real city unless you have your own services. And I think Troutdale deserves that. That's kind of the direction I'd like to see us go. I don't know if it's possible, but it doesn't have to be everything at once. It could start very small and we could grow it, and hopefully contract with other areas. It's kind of my approach. And I hope I didn't offend Gresham or the county sheriffs. I value them and the work they do. And I love the fact that they're constitutionalists and they have a hard job. I recognize that.
They're used to it, being offended. Well, thank you. I think that's going to lead into some of the questions that we want to ask, and we want to have the working group chew through and bring back to us. All right. Move on to fire.
Okay, sounds good. On fire, in terms of services, fire is a completely different beast, of course, in that as opposed to patrol and a presence, they are a come when you call type system. So searching out for a way to provide that is a little differently and has certain complications. We've got, the first of all, the recommendation was to review current service levels and response times, determine what's desirable. We have that data from Gresham and now probably need some help to interpret it, but generally, fire calls are supposed to be answered, I think, nationally within 4 minutes. I think Gresham Fire Department responds to Gresham a little faster than Troutdale. It usually ends up between 4.5 to 5.5 minutes. But I've also read things that say that's an unrealistic expectation in most jurisdictions anyway. Did everyone got a copy of the USC report that Wood Village had? It's really good because it does include Gresham, Wood Village, Fairview, and Troutdale kind of in its overall analysis. It's really helpful into that service. Number 2 is request a consultant to determine likely financial impact of voter-approved new fire district. We had some preliminary numbers that Gresham did to figure out what the impact would be on all the cities if their fire district was instituted. Gresham is now looking for a consultant to help them understand the bigger picture. They have not yet found one, and right now they've not had a city manager for a couple months. So I don't know how quickly that's moving, but it's something that hopefully the letter that the mayor sent gave to them today might prompt us to talk more openly about where we're going. 3, request a bid from Gresham for the new year 10-year contract. Again, that's something part of our overall discussion. All right, what do you guys, we've heard threats from them about sticking it to us. Well, let's sit down and really have a realistic talk about what it means to collaboratively share this service. And so hopefully we can start that soon. The other number 4 is kind of a dependent one, which is kind of doing a 1-year rolling contract, because it depends on whether the cities are seriously looking at asking the citizens for a fire district. If they are, that's probably a 2 or 3 year process, and we don't need that 10-year contract with Gresham. So that's kind of another wild card in the whole review. The other number 5, again, it's probably something to wait on. a month or two, because in our current contract, let me back up. In our contract with Multnomah County Sheriff, in terms of what service we're supposed to get, there's 2 pages of FTE. There's 2 pages that those pages cover what we're supposed to get on the road, covers what duties for detectives and records and all the things they're supposed to do. 2 pages of our contract talks about what Multnomah County Sheriff does for us. The contract with Gresham Fire says we'll get the same coverage we've always had, period. I think that's almost word for word what it says. That's all we're entitled to. So we probably need to be thinking about, does that need to be a little more defined? I did some checking on numbers, and generally Troutdale response times are about 15 to 30 seconds behind Gresham residents get, a little bit slower. In reality, who knows? Seconds matter. Did that matter in any case? Who knows? But it's a consistent pattern. So that's something that needs to be looked at. Number 6, Gresham Fire Emergency Services, chief to appear before council, already scheduled, set for September 27th. Chief Lewis is going to be here, and a lot of these questions we can probably talk to them. Chief Lewis is a great guy. He's great leading the fire department. The only issue with Chief Lewis, and I'll just be honest on the record here, he's not the decision maker over there. It's the mayor, city manager, and the council that really kind of controls. He's just there to take the resources he's given and provide the services he's supposed to all the cities and portions of Fire District 10. So he will be here on February 27th. And then number 7 is consult with a bond levy fire district vote firm or company to help us understand how that process works. The last city to do it successfully was Newburgh in 2018. They did it. I've talked to their city manager. And I don't know if you're aware, Newburgh has had a complete nuclear explosion of leadership in the last 5 years. I mean, they had horrible stuff going on in their city administrative offices and their mayor and stuff. And so everybody is new over there. So I didn't make a comment to the gentleman, but he's the guy who's their new city manager is from Australia. And I wondered if they had to go that far to find somebody who wasn't influenced by the history. But I assume not, be that way. But he's said he's going to look around to find out who they used in 2018. I mean, in Newburgh, it passed by 65% to 35, 40%. It was a pretty overwhelming, let's join the Tualatin Valley Fire District. And generally what Newburgh did, which I've kind of suggested we have to look at, because if the citizens are asked to join a fire district, they're going to see, wow, that's going to be a huge hit on our property tax bills. And the city is going to pocket $2.5 million back. The city, they're the city. What are you talking about? Anyway, $2.5 million back in the general fund to pay for other services is what Newburgh did. They had 2 bond levies, 2 levies. One said, should we join Tualatin Valley Fire District? And number 2 said, if you say yes to number 1, this charter amendment will change the permanent tax rate for a little while so that we reduce the city's property tax rate to give you a break on the new fire district tax rate. So I've suggested before, something like that, ask the citizens to approve an ordinance that says maybe the city throws $1 million to reduce the levy, whatever. But that's something that I think helped Newburgh is that even though it did free up money, the city says, we want to help soften the blow for the citizens. And if I did the math right, they could get their permanent tax rate back at 3% a year. So it was going to take them about 30 years to get back up to their current permanent tax rate. So they basically amortized the hit on their citizens over 30 years, which may be a little longer than you need to, but that worked for them. So anyway, I'm waiting for him to tell me who that is. I have a whole file here. I got all the articles and the measures on what they did back in 2018. It's interesting reading. Recently, Estacada had the same vote. It lost. But Estacada had a unique history in the citizens of Estacada were really pissed off at the Clackamas County Fire District because when we had the big fires in 2020, they felt like Clackamas County Fire abandoned them and didn't protect their city. And so they, heck no, we're not going to want to join the Clackamas County Fire District. So, but I think Newburgh's a good comparison to look at how that was done. It's in the metro area and a larger city. So anyway, so I'm getting that information also. And so I think, in terms of action steps, this kind of lays them out, but a lot of it is right now is trying to get Gresham back to the table to talk. And then at some point, we probably need to decide to start really pursuing, as we find some experts, is a fire district something that we want to do? I mean, as I've told you all before, we're one of the few cities in the metro area that still pays for fire from the general fund. Almost every city except, I think, Hillsborough on the west side, all have a joint Tualatin Valley Fire, and so their general funds are not burdened with the fire costs anymore. And the people seem to really enjoy Tualatin Valley Fire. Seems to have a good reputation and good coverage. Like Oswego, enjoy it?
No,
No.
like Oswego has its own fire district.
Yeah.
But I'll be out at TVF&R's office Thursday morning, because they are very civically active and they have convenings of the local governments to talk about things.
So Lake Oswego, the city doesn't pay for fire. They have a separate property tax line item for the Lake Oswego Fire District.
There is a Lake Oswego Fire District, but it's only part of the city. It's a weird phenomenon.
Just so council knows how this works out, the city of Sandy has the same thing. The city of Sandy has a Sandy Fire District, and it's a separate tax on your line item. It has, the city of Sandy has their permanent tax rate, and then the Sandy Fire District has a separate tax rate. So they have a fire district. However, the Sandy Fire District, they don't have a Sandy Fire Department. They take that money and they contract with Clackamas County Fire District 1. There's a lot of permutations of doing a fire district where you actually join a real fire district like Clackamas Fire District 10, or you just form your own fire district and just use those monies to pay for the fire service from another fire district, or City of Gresham, let's say. Anyway, lots of permutations that can happen, and I think getting somebody who is involved in this, it doesn't happen very often, to get some insight for the council would be good, and that's what I'm working on right now, is getting somebody who can help us make those decisions. Yes, please.
And my firm also represents the city of Dundee, which had the option to join Newburgh in that joint fire district and didn't, but they're now looking at doing something similar with a different district. It passed in the city on a vote, it failed by 4 votes in the district. So the district is going to vote again on it, hopefully with a slightly lower tax increase for the voters in that district. But it does seem to be a very popular way to spread the cost over greater numbers of people, to have a separate district and take it off the city's line item budget.
4 votes?
Pardon? Yeah.
4 votes?
Yeah.
Wow.
It matters, it counts.
It does matter.
Just had a thought. Again, I always warn people, rate things out loud sometimes, and I'm saying it's a great idea, good idea, or bad idea. But because these 2 contract areas are different animals and different issues have to be discussed, we already have the public safety working group, which I think what they heard would be good to look at the law enforcement side. I'm wondering if the council wants to consider appointing a small working group of maybe 3 counselors just to be working on the fire side. Fire, because that's a public vote, fire district, fire district 10, whatever. And so just so we have 2 groups that are becoming, issue experts, one on fire and one on the police one, to help us work through this, so that we're not putting too much on the burden of the public safety working group to try to do both of them, because at this point 2 parallel groups might be a good idea, and maybe a smaller group of just council members, 3 of you, so it's not a quorum, just take the lead on researching all those issues on fire. And they report every month too.
Yeah. Councilor Glantz?
That kind of brought up, I know we had asked Ed before on like the public safety work group. When some of us dial in on Zoom to listen to the meeting, we don't comment, we don't go on camera. Does that still constitute a quorum and an issue? And I never heard the answer on that.
There's a brand new statute out there on serial meetings that's a lot more complicated. We passed around a memo here a little while ago. I'll renew that memo and look specifically at that issue, because for the first time, there's a definition of what constitutes having a deliberation. And the deliberation is any discussion that shares information that may lead to a decision. And what exactly that means is probably completely unworkable, but it's what our legislature gave us. So we have to work with it.
I think Just to add a little bit to that, and just to remind everybody of the 3 lawyers we have, I am not a lawyer in the room right now. I think if there's a gray area, it's best to avoid it.
We're supposed to get some training.
You
Some
know,
training.
yes, the OGEC announced in the end of December that it was going to offer training that would start sometime in January. As of yesterday, it was canceled.
So if we do violate,
You only have to get it within
Oh,
your
man.
first 2 years, I believe, of service.
okay.
So
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting it'd be a public meeting group. And if it's less than a quorum, they just meet together, meet with staff, and they work through.
I like the suggestion. It would just be, it wouldn't be a group similar to the Public Safety Working Group.
Right.
It would just be 3 counselors and staff diving into
Right.
fire services and the upcoming contract
It
negotiations.
couldn't make a recommendation to the council or to any other group, or else it would become a public body.
Right.
But if it were just working with the staff, the city manager, for example, that, let me say, I think that gets past the serial meetings, the new definitions in the laws.
And then, when those 3 council members came to a council meeting and fire service was on the agenda, they could all give you their recommendations in open
In open meeting.
meeting and talk about it there with you, but they would come all being informed and being duty experts on the fire service contracts and fire district. So, because it is a different beast, because it's something that if they decide that they're going to tell the council, we really like the fire district idea, that's going to be a big endeavor that's probably going to go past July 1, 2025. And I think from what I've heard from, I don't know if Mayor Keith and Mayor John are in the same boat, but I think they're thinking for their long-term fire safety, they may want to be asking their citizens for a fire district. They think that's a viable pathway to go.
Yeah, they're feeling the same way. So let's talk a little bit about the letter that we issued.
And by the way, it just got all emailed to you in the last 2 minutes.
Oh, thank you. The letter we sent to, we crafted and sent to Mayor Stovall in Gresham and by extension, his city manager, Eric Schmidt. Thank you. Interim city manager, Eric Schmidt, or acting city. I don't know what the title is. Interim, thank you. They had a council meeting in November, I believe, where Gresham City Council were presented information, and Stovall made a comment stating that they're coming up short by about $5 million this next, anyways,
At least.
in their fire services, in their budget line items, and that the other 3 cities that contract with Gresham have to start paying their fair share. They had another counselor speak up and say, well, why can't we just, basically said, why can't we just invoice them now? Stovall stopped them and said, we can't charge them. We're working under a current contract. There was a vocal support to just show up on City Hall's doorstep, issue Eric probably an invoice for our fair share immediately, because they, in their opinion, we owe it to them to continue to fund their fire department. We issued a letter, crafted a letter with the help of the city managers and served it to Mayor Stovall, asking for better talks and negotiations centered around this upcoming contract, instead of doing it in their public meetings and basically blindsiding us with comments like that. We don't see, well, first of all, to dive into it a little bit more, we're not even sure where the $5 million price tag came from their reports, from our reports. So where they're pulling that from, we're not entirely sure. We're asking them to come to the table with more information as to how they got that.
About a month and a half ago, I asked their city manager, where did Travis Stovall come up with this number? And I've not noticed.
And ghosted.
What?
Well, she was fired, but then
She was
also-
fired, but still, a couple weeks before she was fired, and I still had crickets, nothing back to substantiate the number he gave.
So the essence of the letter was to have conversations in good faith, to enter into these negotiations in good faith, that there's more than just Gresham demanding money from the 3 cities. We need to know why, and then we need to have information going into our next round of negotiations for fire services. That was delivered today. Like I said, he took it, left the meeting. What we came away with the meeting was the mayors are going to meet a little bit more regularly and talk about this conversation. I know Travis, Mayor Stovall, wants to keep the conversations on a mayor level. I don't find it appropriate for us to, one, talk about upcoming contract negotiations on solely a mayor level. Yes, we can have conversations about our goals as a council, and I can speak to that on our mayor's group, but I think the negotiations need to be handled in a public meeting. I think at the very least, our city managers need to be having those conversations, and the council needs to be involved in that moving forward. I think the citizens need to know what's happening, and the opportunities to have those conversations need to be more public facing instead of a coffee meeting once a month. Saying that, we are going to meet a little bit more regularly and have conversations centered around our path forward. I'm sharing information with what we're doing. They're sharing information with what their councils are prepared to start studying and looking at, because we're all going into the same problem with our fire services with Gresham, and the contracts are coming up around the same time. So we have a similar goal. We have a similar path we're walking on, but we want to make sure that we're doing that in a proper and appropriate way. So we sent that letter asking for just that. Anything to add, Ray? And you all have that letter now. It's in your emails.
Yeah, and the other big issue too is that Gresham really has no clue whether they want to pursue a fire district or not.
Right.
There are some people say, we have to hold on to our fire department. We have to have a fire department. We'd be a full service city. We have to have a fire department, even as their general fund continues to be sucked dry. They are really struggling for money. They have another bond levy, the last one lost in May, that they're asking the citizens to agree to vote, approve another $1.40 per thousand on their tax bill for a 5-year stopgap measure to help their funding for 5 years. But this is a 5-year stopgap. It's not going to solve any long-term issues.
It's a Band-Aid.
Right, and if you read the fine print in the audit, going back a couple of agenda items, one of the things the audit tells us that we all have to be worried about in city government is this 3% limit on our annual property value increases that started in the mid-90s, every year is eating into our general funds. And every year all the cities get closer to the edge of struggling. Gresham and Fairview are closer to that edge than Troutdale and Wood Village are, but we're going to get there someday. And so Gresham is going to get there sooner than we are if they don't deal with some other solutions.
To follow up on that, everybody should remember that since at least 2007 to 08, we've had inflation rates that are around 3% for everything. And historically, inflation is higher than that, and the 3% increase in the budget doesn't keep up with the standard 3% inflation rate, which is cost of foods and things like that. It doesn't keep up with the cost of labor and equipment. As the inflation rate has picked up in the last couple of years and continues to be over 2%, up in the 3-4% range, it's likely to get far worse, and cities are going to struggle in this state much more than they already have. It's a looming crisis that nobody seems to really want to talk a lot about. So talk to your constituents about it. It's a problem.
Councilor Glantz.
Oh yeah, back when in May, when the Gresham bond measure failed, I listened in, it's either the end of May, 1st of June, where they had a public work session on, budget shortfalls, particularly related to police and fire. And part of that 5 million shortfall at that time was reported to them as coming from money they had used as part of the COVID money, where it was making up. And since that was no longer coming in, that was where that percentage went. And so I took out, how we get those reports every year, or at least we used to, from the fire department, on how many calls there were, what type of calls, all that kind of stuff, and did some napkin math, and Troutdale was exactly, if not just a little under, what in terms of percent of calls that go into Troutdale versus what we pay.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that I'm gonna take another swipe at Gresham, is that when they got that COVID money, they made the cardinal mistake of any financial department. They used some of their COVID money for ongoing expenses, hiring staff. Well, that COVID money only lasted a couple of years, and now they're having to pay for that stuff without that money. You wisely did not use it as a Christmas gift from grandma to go spend wherever you wanted to and incur long-term expenses. So we don't have that similar problem now as what Gresham did with some of their COVID money.
Councilor Witcher.
Two questions. One, why was this hand delivered rather than electronically delivered to Gresham?
It was a letter from the 3 mayors to Mayor Stovall. It was also electronically delivered.
And then I guess number two.
But they also already had a meeting scheduled today anyway. Did you already have your?
Yeah, we already
had
our
a meeting anyway, in person.
Yeah.
Okay, and I guess that goes to my next question of, we can talk about, more public face transparency. Is this letter going to be released to the public, either social media or something to show, hey, look, the 3 cities are extending an olive branch? Because the letter is very congenial, very, very well put together, very gracious letter. My opinion, it would be good to get it out there to show early, to show that we are already extending out a olive branch to Gresham to start some communication going forward, showing that, we're heading down the right path.
Yeah, I'll say that you all have the letter.
Okay.
That is what I will say.
And the letter was crafted with the idea that you have to assume every public document's gonna get to the front page of the New York Times. And
It's public record anyways.
Yeah, so you better be comfortable with what it says when it gets to the public.
Yeah.
But I think we were pretty direct with Gresham though about, we were talking before, why can't we talk again?
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
anyway, so I think the only action step I need is for the council probably to specifically reconstitute by motion the public safety working group to look at the law enforcement issues we previously discussed on the record. I don't go through them again. And then consider, do you want to have another second smaller group that just deals with the fire issues itself? So I guess those are 2 action steps for the council tonight. You can just do by motion.
Yeah, absolutely. Councilor 1, please.
Trying to formulate it. We have a lot of things that we need answers to, but what are we expecting from this public safety working group to accomplish? Like we have all these questions that we need answers to. I don't think there's much more for them to do until we have the answers to these questions. Are they going to, is the idea that they would just kind of go over this and then report back to the council? Because it seems like the council will need the answers to all these questions, and it would be an ongoing discussion between the 7 of us so we can all make what we feel is like the best decision for Troutdale. I guess I just don't understand what this group on the side is going to do or accomplish besides just maybe nitpick through some of this. Is that like, I want to throw it out there that.
Yeah.
My purpose in asking for the public safety working group to come back is for 2 issues. One, they need to determine for our consultant, how big should the Troutdale Police Department be if you recreated it? Looking at our last budget and our last FTE, see if they wanted increases in that, and then take our consultant to come up with, all right, if that's the Troutdale Police Department you would like to have, then this is what it would cost to create it, this is what it would cost to run it every year. And so that committee would say, all right, what are we gonna tell them we want them to budget for us, to create a budget for us? The second thing they would do would be to take our current contract with Multnomah County Sheriff, look at those 2 pages of service that they're supposed to be providing, and then the sheet that shows the FTE that we're paying for, and look at that and say, do we need to adjust that in the next contract? Because what, should we add this, add that, change this, make it look like this? So once those service providing details in the contract are reevaluated, then we can take that to Multnomah County Sheriff and say, what's that gonna cost us? And then we can take that same thing and go to Gresham Police and say, what would that cost us? So we can at least get, 2 competing bids, but it's trying to give them a good a proposal that lists the requested services clearly. So those kind of the two things I would like the working group to work on. And some of that input to decide how big a police department we should have or what changes we should make in the contract. We probably pull in a consultant, either a professor at one of the colleges who does stuff like this, or maybe talk to somebody like, Chief Robin from formerly of Gresham, or Chief/City Manager Dave Nelson, formerly of Troutdale, to help the committee understand what might be good. So
You want them to nitpick out some of these questions a little bit farther and to have direct.
so those are the two things I think that have reconstituted very limited focus and scope.
Okay, and then if I would just ask that we put a timeline on that to accomplish these things, so that we know that they're gonna get whatever that we want from this group, it's gonna get done in a timely fashion.
Yeah, and I think that brings up a really good point, that whatever decision we make, there needs to be this needs to be done quickly. We're already behind the 8 ball. We're already fighting a ticking clock. And so if we decide to go forward with these two separate groups, that exactly what you said, we should set deadlines, we should set goals, and move forward with that.
Yeah,
quickly.
February 27th, we'll have an agenda item to get an update on both these issues. Just track it every month, so you can pay attention to it.
And then I did like what Ray and Councilor Glantz brought up, having regular monthly agenda items, so we can keep tabs on where we're at, how we're progressing, or maybe if we're falling off or becoming stagnant. I think that's a great idea. Good. Yes.
Yeah, I just wanna, yep.
But we are probably gonna have to verify the members.
Yes, and that is what we'll do. We can.
That's gonna be a small timeline pickup, maybe.
Yeah, and we can have staff work through who is on.
Done.
Yes, you want to do it? I'm just checking the current Peace Wag members to see the ones who are here.
I think Rich is here for peace and quiet.
Carol, take it.
I think a fire district actually fails if there's not some compromise.
Rich, do me a favor. Come speak up in the microphone, since Ray was so nice to point on you.
To suck you in.
Yeah,
Rich Allen, Troutdale.
thank you.
So I actually think a fire district fails if there's not something to be gained on the law enforcement side. So I'd caution against actually separating the two. Now, if there needs to be a subcommittee from the group to do some work in between meetings, having it be that it is broken up by people from various groups that may not meet as often, that could be accomplished. But I don't think I would separate the two if you want a fire district to actually have a chance.
Okay. Good comment. Okay.
That is one of the connecting points between the two is that we would hope that the money saved from continuing to pay for fire from the general fund would be at least portion of it poured back into law enforcement and parks, two things that our citizens love.
Without something, the gain is just going to appear as another tax.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And this is not a good time.
Yep. Any other comments or questions for staff? Councilor White?
Yeah, should we be looking at like election schedules? Because I assume if we're gonna do a district, that it would go to a vote.
I think that's something that the consultant will dive into, because we'll get an idea of what bonds and what levies are coming out.
Well, creating a new district imposes a new tax and has to be voted on either at a November or May ballot. And if I remember right, the Novembers don't require the double majority, but the Mays might.
Right.
There's an Article 11, Section 1111K, if I remember right, that is an exception to it, but I can't remember what all
The other thing that came up with Councilor Simpson from Metro last month at the city manager meetings with him was, we really want better communication from Metro and Multnomah County when they are putting levies on the ballot. Because if we're competing with other money levies, some citizens just say, no. And quite frankly, the Troutdale residents are more likely to be very more discerning about paying more taxes than Portland. So our Troutdale voters who are only voting on our levies see that they're being asked in Portland, they're gonna vote no on ours and theirs and not differentiate between the tax. So those are kind of the strategies you gotta think about, is which election to put it, and the double, you wanna avoid the double majority problem where you have to have 50% of the voters and 50% of the ballots. And that's what a consultant can tell you, which is the best way to.
That assumes that outfits like Metro know in advance when they don't.
Yeah, that's a good point, Councilor.
So, yeah, that picking a vote date is tricky, and we also, further issue, we gotta coordinate it with the other 3 cities. If everybody says, yeah, we wanna ask the citizens to join Fire District 10 or a new, we should all do it together, so we piling on the informational stream that's coming out from everybody. It feels like it's this community trying to move forward to something.
Councilor Glantz.
Do we have that on this work plan as one of the questions? That's the timing to talk to voters?
On there is to consult with a bond levy fire district firm regarding the steps for possible asking citizens to join. So yeah, part of the number 7 on the fire one is getting an expert to talk to us. You know, school districts use these people all the time when they do their bond levies. Okay, how do we do this right? What's the messaging? How should it work? What should we provide? How should we schedule it? They make their living giving you the best shot at passing things. So yes, it's on the list.
Councilor One.
Yeah, I think that we have 2 complex problems here with fire and law enforcement. And I think that two groups would be good to tackle each problem individually, so you can give it your sole focus. And then, you know, if whatever happens, if we decide to do a fight, I think just it's our messaging, and that we come together in solidarity, messaging people why and what that's going to look like for them and what they're going to get from that would be really important in making sure that people understand that why this decision is being made or why this is being brought to them. So
I agree. Mr. Ray Young.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. Ed and I were discussing over here other options for law enforcement funding. I'm sorry, Councilor One, did you have a question for me?
No, I did not. No.
Well, then fine.
He had a wonderful statement that he just made.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Very inspiring.
I will say, you know, part of the issue with, you know, the comments about this, the issue of that bringing them together is a money issue. And if, you know, the public safety working group, they talk about law enforcement, they could have, you know, 2 suggestions. One is, well, if we free up more money from a fire district approved down the road, because the thing is, our new contract for law enforcement is probably going to get resolved in advance of the fire district fire services with Gresham issue. Because if you do a fire district, it could take 2 or 3 years, while we're 18 months from the new police contract. So they could come back and say, all right, under our current resources and what we're paying now, if we increase it to here, we think we're good. But then again, if the citizens vote to join the fire district and more funds are freed up, we would love to have the city afford to do this. And so you could kind of come back with 2 ways of going about it, you know, 2 suggestions depending on certain things, like Newburgh did with their fire district. Yes, should we join the fire district? And 2, do you want us to go ahead and cut your taxes to help pay for it? So they get 2 questions. And so for us, it's kind of like not the same voter question, but same idea. That they could say, all right, under current resources, without straining our general fund too much, if we're paying for fire services from the general fund, we can only increase police this much. However, this is our wish list. Based on what they hear from other cities and the consultants, your city really ought to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G, more than what you can afford right now. Then that may be part of what gets presented to the citizens on the fire district vote, if it ever comes to that. Is that the recommendation of cities, if you pass this, we're going to free up some money and we're going to do this. Again, anything that you do for asking voters for something needs to be expressed in terms of what's in it for you. Gresham screwed up, I think, their last bond levy where they said, if you don't approve this, we're going to cut your fire and police.
Yeah.
You know, threats like that don't go over with voters very well.
No, I think focusing on the positive message on
Yes.
how what we've decided, and we didn't come to the decision, if we decide to go that route, we didn't come to it lightly, but the reasoning why is A, B, C, D. And we're hoping that the service will increase. We're hoping that will increase livability, will increase safety, will increase emergency response in our community. Everything, in my opinion, everything should be centered around solutions and not complaints or threats. I respond better to that. And so I hope that that's a similar message that we can put out for everybody. This isn't a light thing that we're doing. It's not something that we discuss regularly every year. This is a big deal. So with respect to Rich Allen's comments, I think splitting this group up will accomplish two things. In our original working safety group, it was a lot of information. It was a lot of information all at once. It was a lot of information on two important topics. I think the group did a great job. I think we can do a better job and a more efficient job if we split that up. And even if we look at having meetings somewhat around the same time, we can accomplish two things at the same time. And we can really hyper-focus and dive into fire and emergency services and then police services. So I'm in favor of reconstituting the public safety working group and then convening a 3-counselor small working group focused on fire only. That's my recommendation.
Who is on the public safety working group?
We'll have to pull the roster, but
Councilor
Whitron
Whitron,
and
Mayor Lauer, Rich Allen, Carol Allen, Twyla
Harrington.
and Victoria Rizzo, and Tanny Stephenson.
Thank you, Ray.
That's 7.
That is why you get paid.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't Rich caution against splitting it up?
Yeah.
What do you think?
Mr. Mueller had his hand up really quick. Mr. Mueller, please.
I was just gonna mention, I don't know if Ray mentioned it.
Come to the microphone.
Can we hear you? The record, we want Mr. Wilcox to hear you and the other council members who are not here.
I'm not sure if Ray mentioned it at the very beginning of as he started in, but part of what we had discussed in the management team meeting was that having the discussion tonight, getting the council consensus, and then bringing you back a resolution at the next meeting to actually reconstitute them and spell out what their new charter would be, because their past charter that's expired was this broad, and we're wanting to now narrow it down in. So I guess as you're struggling with this, I'm wanting to suggest that you don't have to refine all of it tonight. We'll bring you back something in black and white that helps spell all this out based on what the conversation has been, and then certainly you can tweak it if need be, but you don't need to get it resolved tonight.
And following up on that fabulous idea, that doesn't mean I can't call all 7 of you and schedule a meeting just as old friends to start talking, knowing that the official document will be at a council meeting in February. Or the 23rd.
Yeah, that's our next council meeting.
Yeah,
2
so,
weeks.
This month.
yeah, this
2
month.
council meetings.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, in 2 weeks.
That's because I think that's important, continuing
Yeah,
to
yeah.
keep this moving forward, bringing something back within 2 weeks so we can get started and still aim to hit that end of February 2nd council meeting for an update. Councilor Whitron.
I know it's kind of rushed timeline, can't call a special council meeting when we have our URA meeting next week. Just do this 5-minute meeting and then have our URA meeting.
Ask staff.
Yeah, we could do a special meeting just for one issue, resolution to reconstitute the public safety working group and give them their charge. And then the only thing, there'll be no staff report, we've talked about it enough, just a copy of the resolution.
Yep.
We could probably, Sarah?
If I can get it by Thursday morning. You
Okay,
mentioned.
I'll get it to you by Thursday morning.
There you go.
That's fine, if that's okay with council,
We're all together anyway.
we work for you. So,
Good idea, good recommendation.
Okay, and the public safety working group previously looked at both the law enforcement issue and the fire issue.
Correct.
Seems like that ought to continue to me.
I said it, I was thinking out loud, I didn't say it was a great idea, I was thinking.
No, I mean, it just seems
So,
like
yes.
they would have they did it before, and rather than trying to form a new group. But that's just a thought.
Okay. Any other thoughts on the matter? I'm going to open it up to public comment as well, but any other thoughts from council on the matter?
They do seem like two separate matters. I kind of, being on the public safety working group, it's a lot. Having a focus group of 3 counselors, I think, will help narrow the focus.
Yeah, and I think keeping it on a efficient timeline, like I said, we can tackle 2 subjects at once and be focused on each individual subject a little bit more and spending time wisely, because like I said, again, we're already racing a ticking clock.
With the, just to ask, the counselors would just deal with fire.
Correct.
Fire.
All right, so we can give general direction to staff if the majority feels they are in favor of sending staff back with recommendations to come back with a resolution at the next URA, have a special council meeting to reconstitute the public safety working group to look solely at police contract services and the topics that Ray and staff provided earlier. And then another small 3-counselor working group focused on fire only. Counselor Glantz. And I am going to open this up to public comment really quick. Counselor Glantz.
Yeah, I would not just say only police, because the budgets are interdependent. What ends up in police is going to be a direct impact. And what's spent on one is going to impact the other and how it's spent. So I don't know that it should be solely, maybe focused on police. And I think fire is probably the most important. And from a public optics standpoint, I think that should be the one that's a public meeting. I'd almost flip it and have the 3 counselors work on police and have public safety in a public forum talk about fire.
Counselor White.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of the working group. I would listen to Rich's advice, and mainly because it's a negotiation too. And once we bring it into a public meeting in that arena, we lose a lot of our negotiation ability, because everything's going to be right there before them. And I know that hurts us. The cities are terrible negotiators because of all our public rules and laws that we have.
Let me get out Counselor Caswell really quick, and then go to Counselor One.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important that we keep it really concise and kind of simplified for ourselves, kind of like what we've been talking about is like 2 groups, they can both work at the same time, get it done quickly, and have some structure to this so that we can move it forward and everybody kind of knows what's going on. So, I mean, Randy, I support what pretty much everything you said earlier. Like, I think the simpler, the better, and the quicker and the more positive, the better too. Exactly what you said. And I think we should just kind of try and stick to that mindset personally.
Okay. Thank you, Counselor Caswell. Counselor One.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I don't see there any negotiating happening within this group. Like, it's literally a fact-finding mission to then present, to have a small group to then present to the large group. And so literally information is just going to be given, hammered through, and then out to, and then I'm assuming at some point down the road, negotiations with either Gresham or whoever else will happen in a different forum. But I just see this as hammering through a bunch of information and coming up with some suggestions from a small group to a large group. Is that, if somebody feels like I'm,
no, that's,
I would love to hear it, but that's how I'm seeing it.
Yeah.
So 2 small groups. Is that what you're saying?
I think you separate law enforcement and fire, hammer through all those complex issues in the 2 small groups, and then it all comes back together with monthly reports on whatever timeline we set for those people, those groups to accomplish their task.
Okay. Any other comments from council? All right, I'm gonna open it up to public Councilor Glantz. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just curious, are we talking about two small groups? Is the public safety work group considered a small group, or is there a public safety work group and then two counselor groups?
Public Safety Working Group, and then a separate 3 counselor working group to dive into fire. Focused.
And those are both considered small groups?
Correct.
Thanks.
Yep. All right, let's open it up to public comment regarding agenda item number 7, a report next steps on law enforcement and fire service contracts. Public comments open. Council chambers. Nope. Anybody on Zoom wishes to make public comment on the item, now is the time. Go ahead and unmute yourself and state your name and city of residence for the record.
Mayor Lauer, Paul Wilcox, Troutdale.
Thank you, Paul.
Okay, listening to Ray providing the options for police services, one option I didn't hear was a 3 cities police department. I heard Councilor White kind of alluding to that as kind of the Troutdale Police Department being a lead agency with possibly contracting to Wood Village and Fairview. And I've also heard Ray mention comparing a Troutdale Police Department with cities of a similar size, where if you were doing a 3 cities police department, rather than looking at a population of 15,000, you might want to look at a population of 30,000. And I also think you have a 3 cities police department now, really, with the sheriff's department covering the 3 cities with their deputies. And I get the feeling that the three cities deputies are pretty much used interchangeably. And I can give you an example of that. Last summer, I called in a traffic accident in front of the Wood Village Walmart, and there were 2 MCSO patrol cars showed up to investigate that. So Wood Village has only got 1 deputy. So where did that other patrol car come from? It's either Fairview or Troutdale. And it could have been a sergeant, but I seriously doubt that. So they're really, there's a lot of question about how much floating around they're doing. I suspect there's quite a bit of interchange, crossing the border. So that's kind of what I had for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else on Zoom? All right, not seeing anybody. I'm going to close public comment. Really quick, where we at? Exhibit A, number 5, request a consultant to prepare estimate for one-time startup cost to recreate Troutdale Police Department and annual general fund budgetary cost of a Troutdale Police Department at the desirable law enforcement service level. Also part of 5, coordinate with Wood Village and Fairview to include them in additional financial analysis of creating a larger 3 cities police department. It was part of the purview moving forward in item number 5 on Exhibit A. But good comment. Thank you, Paul. All right, I think we, given no more comments or questions for staff from council, I think we have our direction for staff.
Well, what is that then?
Oh,
Summarize
it. It was
We'll find out next Tuesday.
reconstitute public safety working group to look at, police services, and then start a 3 counselor working group focused on fire.
Yeah, just simple resolutions, not very complicated.
And we'll have a framework next week presented of what that's going to actually, more words than what I just said.
Oh, yeah. There'll be in resolutions more detailed.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just comment that I'll defer to Councilor Wittrin and you, Mayor Lauer, who've been on the working group, that you think it's better to do 2 groups. It seems like a big order, so I'll defer to that, and I do agree with the direction you're giving.
Yeah, I think.
Thank you, Council President.
I also don't think it's inconsistent with Rich Allen's comment that these issues, when they're presented to the citizens, need to be put together. We can cross that bridge later, but that still can be done. This isn't inconsistent with that. So anyway.
All right.
Sounds good.
Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. Thank you, staff. Let's move on to agenda item number 8, staff communications.
Thank you, Mayor. Number 1, the Parks Advisory Committee had a meeting on December 20th where they talked about a recommendation to council for additional parks to be leashed dogs. That will be on the agenda on January 23rd for you to receive their recommendation. I will also get you an email this week with a link to their meeting on December 20th. I know Councilor Glantz has listened to it, and I'm going to suggest that you all, before the 23rd, get a chance to listen to their comments and their discussion. It might help you understand the report that you'll get on the 23rd, but you'll get an email reminding you of that. Next Monday is Martin Luther King Day, and city offices will not be open, which goes along with number 3, with we're all watching weather very carefully. And as of today, and everything can change tomorrow, who knows, but they tell us that for the next couple of days, things will be relatively mild, but Friday night will determine what's going to happen over the weekend. If Friday night, all you see is just rain and cold, likely the weekends are going to be relatively minor. If you have snow starting on Friday night, you can imagine you may have 3 to 6 inches or 7 inches over the weekend. So at this point, that's what the forecasters for the National Weather Service are saying. So we're watching that. Our crews are getting ready with, snow plows and sanding, and so we're getting ready to go just in case they're needed. For everybody, I guess it's good that it's a 3-day weekend when the worst of it hits, so if it happens. Number 4, as you already know, we have a meeting next Tuesday night. We get 3 in a row this month, and you've got a copy of that 5. You've got that copy of that letter we sent to Gresham. So that was it, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Council communications, Council President Rittman.
I'll just wish everyone a happy new year. Let's hope 2024 goes well. That's all.
Thank you. Councilor Wynn.
I knew it was coming and I just wasn't. I think I want to start the new year by saying thank you for this last year of my first term, or first year of doing city council. I appreciate everybody. I feel like we have a really good rapport. Everybody's very respectful, and I think that's important to acknowledge in a group that needs to work together over important issues. And then just want everybody to be careful this weekend, whether you're working or at home, and plan ahead.
Great. Councilor Caswell.
Nothing for me. Happy New Year.
You. Councilor Glantz.
Yeah, I have a question. I work on or serve on several transportation committees outside of council. And in a recent work session, there was a pretty lengthy conversation about what the priority for transportation and roads should be. Should it be safety or should it be the environment? So safety would be something like putting up guardrails to keep people from going into ditches. Environment would be, different ways to get people to drive less, more of a long-term type of a solution. And I'd be curious, and please feel free to email me or mention something, what you think the better plan is. Do you think it's better to save lives now or save lives in the future? I'd love to hear feedback.
Great. Thank you, Councilor Glantz. I'll go. I had a sit down yesterday with Assistant District Attorney Nathan Vasquez. We had a great conversation centered around his views and his direction. He's running for District Attorney in Multnomah County. The mayor's also this morning had a sit down with District Attorney Mike Schmidt. We had another great conversation centered around his continued vision, his views moving forward. I think the one thing, obviously, they're running against each other, so differing opinions and differing philosophies, but still great conversations either way. one thing that came out from both of the conversations is the community district attorneys, neighborhood district attorney program that was started, and maybe Ray or even Ed can I think it was started under DA Underhill. And I think Multnomah County was the first county to institute a neighborhood district attorney program. It was, from what it was said, it was the pillar of neighborhood justice and reform and policing. It was cut under, who was before Schmidt? Shrunk. It was cut under Shrunk, budgetary cuts. Both of them are talking about bringing it back. I believe it's reinstituted. Gresham and Portland fund it. They're bringing DAs and ADAs out to the outer reaches of Multnomah County. We have one that comes out and meets regularly at inside Rockwood. He wasn't able to tell me what organization he's meeting at, his ADA is meeting at, but this sparked another conversation amongst the mayors that we didn't know that. Gresham knew that. We didn't know that. So we're going to try, we're efforting having either DA Schmidt or one of his assistant or deputy district attorneys, I'm not sure if that's the title, come to city council more regularly than never and giving updates or I guess where the state of things are in Multnomah County, specifically out here in East County. I think the neighborhood district attorneys program can be a great program if the neighborhoods know about it. So look forward to that. Otherwise, have a good New Year and be safe this weekend. Councilor White.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to give a shout out to my good friend Len Otto. I noticed his picture was in the Metro monthly flyer they send out, and he was successful in getting some handicap parking up the Oxbow Park boat ramp. And there's a group of older gentlemen that fish there regularly, and if you've ever wanted to learn how to catch fish, I recommend you go there and watch what those guys are doing. So I'm glad to see Len Otto is still active out there in the community. So Happy New Year.
Councilor Wittrin.
Happy New Year to everybody. As it is a new year, though, it still seems like we've got a lot on our plate with fire and police and the Confluence site, and we just need to stay focused. And but like Councilor One said, it seems like we're all communicating really, really well this last year, and hopefully we all keep it up and head and Troutdale in the right direction. So,
good. All right.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, everybody, have a good evening. Thank you very much for the discussion. It was fantastic. See you next week.